we're going to look at the land use plan itself briefly. Something you may want to consider is a development capacity analysis, otherwise known as a build-out analysis. This is where you're using your existing zoning, infrastructure, constraints, and the boundaries of your community, your jurisdiction. You can determine, what can we accommodate in terms of growth. And this is something that the Maryland Department of Planning has done in the past and will continue to do in the past to support jurisdictions. Right now, we're currently in the middle of updating our growth model, but we've been in touch with all the jurisdictions that planning and zoning in this state to get through a QA/QC process. You also want to inventory a number of aspects of your community. What are those areas served by public water and sewer? What are your environmental constraints? And not constraints in a bad way. These are obviously many of the environmental resources that we mentioned earlier that you would want to preserve. What is your redevelopment needs analysis, including infill capacity? And this goes back to perhaps as part of your visioning, part of the pre-planning you did, your SWOT analysis. What is your direction of this plan when it comes to infill, and how will that determine your inventory in the areas that you want to grow and what is available for growth in your plan? Essentially, what are your land use needs based on the projected growth, following many of the steps that Krishna just described to us? I'm not going to go into this table in great detail, but I do encourage you to come back and look at it. This is one way to calculate your land use area needs. You start off by determining the dwellings needed to accommodate the projected growth. You're averaging your household size and considering your vacancies and what are the dwellings that are needed. Then you want to allocate to your residential land use districts based on the permitted densities. This could be your rural area or your medium density, high density. Then you want to estimate your actual space requirements for those dwelling units based on those land use designations. You always want to adjust upward using a safety margin to provide for flexibility and choice, but also to avoid limiting land supply. This will result in the space required for new dwellings, which you then add to the existing development to calculate the total land required. These calculations can then be used to estimate square footage of commercial and office space, other employment areas, as well as supportive public facilities, open space, schools, infrastructure, and other community amenities. So this goes back to a lot of what Eric was saying about the residential growth driving a lot of the other amenities and land use demand. You may also want to consider alternatives and scenarios or scenario modeling. This is most applicable to communities expecting significant change along the planning horizon, growth or new expanded major employer or community anchor, or wanting to address something like climate change impacts. Essentially, you come up with a variety of scenarios and you develop metrics. This is from the Livable Frederick Master Plan. Develop metrics such as jobs, how is this going to impact our air and water quality? What is the fiscal impact? And then you can use these metrics as part of your planning decision making. You can include it also as part of your outreach effort. This is kind of one way to start at some options for the end and kind of look backwards using metrics. What would be the policies and strategies needed to reach each scenario? And then they all have their various constraints and trade-offs. None of them are going to be the absolute perfect aspect of your community that you're looking for. What are the positives? What are the trade-offs? And then maybe you find something, blending or a hybrid of the different alternatives or scenarios. Ultimately, we know we're going to have to develop goals, objectives, policies, strategies, and actions. These are often used differently. This is just how I consider them. This is not how they have to be determined, but there's a good way to think about it. Goals are like a desired state of being. They're kind of the next step down from the vision. What you want things to look like and feel like when, after the plan has been implemented. Objectives consider as measurable results arising from plan and implementation. Where will we be? These could be quantitative, measurable results. Policies are rules for decision making that will implement objectives. This is how we think. All right, we talked about earlier, one of the purposes of comp plans is to support decision making. This is an area it can. And then finally, strategies and actions are the means for achieving goals. This is what we will do to implement our plan. And there's some examples in here from various Maryland comprehensive plans. So specifically talking about strategies, and actions. These are just some of the strategies and actions you can use as part of that what we do to implement our plan. You know, things like zoning, where your growth areas, what about density? What aspects are you going to prioritize? What comes first? You can also prioritize decision making. Are you going to provide incentives to your targeted industry clusters or even to homeowners? What programs might you develop or expand for affordable housing or even your staffing resources? Who do you want to partner with? Local nonprofits, employers, or even neighboring jurisdictions? And then finally, funding. Or it's not finally, but funding. These could be both locally developed and how and where are you going to pursue other funding, either through state, regionally, or even at the federal level. And you may also want to consider additional plans, which we're going to look at next, that can further be an extension of your comprehensive plan. Other types of plans, these are usually incorporated, but not always, by reference into the comprehensive plan and serve to drill down to the details that a comp plan cannot. If incorporated, they have the same authority as a comprehensive plan. Often they are adopted after a comprehensive plan as an implementation measure, but sometimes they are adopted prior to a new comprehensive plan and carried over into the new plan. If this is the case, they should be considered as part of the comp plan process, right? Something that was developed years before, is it still applicable? Is our new plan consistent? Yeah, do they still apply? Do they need to be updated? And a comprehensive plan does not exist in a vacuum. It influences and is influenced by many other plans. Here's just a few of them and designations. Water and sewer plans are required to be consistent with a comprehensive plan and vice versa. Annexations, if you want to annex an area, it needs to be included in the municipal growth element. MDOT priority letters, which counties submit as part of the consolidated transportation plan every year. If the projects that are included in there are consistent with the comp plan, they're more likely to be included in the consolidated transportation plan. DHCD sustainable communities are also required to be consistent with a comprehensive plan. And then priority funding areas, which we work closely with here at Maryland Department of Planning. If you want an area to be eligible to be a priority funding area, it needs to be included in a growth area in the comprehensive plan. It's important to note that comprehensive plan is policy, not regulation, but it is closely related to regulation. Zoning is required to be consistent with the comprehensive plan as part of the implementation of the plan. There's a few code references where you'll find that. And if you're looking for a definition of that consistency, you'll find that in the land use article reference sections listed at the